So I was reading a post from Molly Baskett, who's a UCC pastor out in California, and it made me think about my own upbringing because she was writing about non-toxic cults, which I'm not saying that the church I grew up with was non-toxic. It definitely had some cult features. So I just had to share a little bit about my own wilderness experience that I growing up, because I just felt led to share a little bit about it. So I grew up Southern Baptist Church, and sometimes when I share some of the stories and things I went through, people think I'm joking, but I'm not. I was baptized at 7, and then I don't want to share too much because I feel like there's so much I could share. But some of the highlights were just some of the toxic things that I was told to believe. And me being a good rule follower, a people pleaser, God pleaser, I took at face value whatever the pastor threw out. I did not, and I look back and I'm like, I wish I would have questioned more, but then again, like, I think everything in my life, every step that I've taken, every step that I didn't take, I think it led me to where I am today. All the trauma, all the heartbreak I went through growing up, I think it's led me to be the person I am today. So, some of my early traumatic experiences in that church. I used to be afraid of communion because the pastor would say that you could die if you take communion, especially if you have unconfessed sins. And I was a sinner, just like the rest of them. Oh, yeah. And then when I was 13, my grandma was dying of cancer, and the pastor came to visit. And I remember him saying to her on her deathbed that the reason she was dying was because of her sin. The reason she had cancer was because of her unconfessed sin. Which, thinking about that, whew, because then I kept thinking, well, maybe if my grandma wasn't such a sinner, maybe she wouldn't have gotten cancer. Like, the two are not equivalent, right? Because I think about my mom, who had cancer when I was born, had leukemia, was given months to live, and somehow survived. And then I'm like, well, why did my mom survive and not my grandma? Because my grandma did end up dying. Toxic. But then the one I always like to share, and people are always like, no way. My youth group was very interesting. We did some really weird stuff. We did a Fear Factor one year where I remember kids, we had to eat dog food. We had to, like, put our face in dog food to get to something. Then we did a challenge where we invited kids to drink a whole gallon of milk in one take. And I can remember the kids trying to do it and throwing up in front of everyone. That's gross. And the one that takes the cake is that, keep in mind, I'm a teenager struggling with my sexuality in a very conservative church. So one summer, we decided to do, our youth pastor was like, let's have a competition, and it's going to be really fun. It was essentially a mud wrestling contest for teenagers. Actually, I don't know if I remember a tarp, and I remember baby oil. I swear to God, this happened. And the girls wrestled the girls, the boys wrestled the girls, and there was a trophy to be had. I don't think I won the trophy, but I do remember wrestling one of the girls that, looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, I had a big old crush on her. So yeah, nothing like getting down on a tarp and wrestling people. My God. Now I look back and all those years, I went to California when I was at Cedarville, and and this was still when I was still struggling with my sexuality. I hadn't come out yet, even though yeah. Um, so I was on this mission trip, a month, a summer long mission trip with this conservative, very conservative Christian organization. So I spent the summer in L.A. and we, you know, spread the gospel. Mostly just the gospel, and didn't really actually help meet anyone's actual needs. Like give them food. But anyway, I remember one day while I was on this mission trip, we went to the beach, and I remember having the biggest crush on the lady that was like the leader of our group. Anyway, so we went to the beach on one of our off days and just hung out. But I remember someone was like, "Let's play football," and we played not just like flag football. We played tackle football on the beach. Yeah, okay. Always fun things. But the one that I just had to share before I get off here, uh, I so this is one that some of my friends who went to Cedarville, you all experienced this. So I had this professor who liked to do a lot of hands-on classes, which looking back, I liked it. I liked, like, we did a homeless weekend, which was very interesting. We slept outside. It was in February, so that was interesting. Like at one point, our shoes were taken away in the middle of the night because that was all part of, to show us what it's like to be homeless. We actually had to go out and beg for food. Yeah, but that's not the one. So speaking of like wilderness and being out in the middle of nowhere. So this professor had us do a refugee weekend. And essentially this was to help us understand what it's like to be a refugee. Which looking back, I'm like, yeah, still very traumatic when I really think about it. So I remember it was a Friday to Sunday, and we met at like the main common area at Cedarville. And then all this happened, like, and no one thought anything of it. I doubt that there's a professor that does this. So there was probably 20 of us. So we met, and we were we were blindfolded and hand tied. Our hands were tied behind our back. Blindfolded and hand tied, and then we were shoved into a van. And then we were taken. This was probably like 8 o'clock at night. Then the van drove us to God knows where. Still to this day, I don't know exactly where we were dropped off. Then we were shoved into a barn. This is so true. Maybe I should write a book. So we were put into a barn. I remember that part because it was in the barn when they like untied our hands and then took the blindfold off, and we were in this barn. And none of us knew exactly what was happening. Then all of a sudden, the professor and some other people showed up with guns and started shooting the guns off to get us to leave the barn. Now, given there were blanks, but God, yeah. So then we had to travel by foot in the middle of the night. I don't even remember where, to be honest. I don't remember where we slept that night. But I think we just slept outside with no sleeping bags because we didn't have anything. We were told to not bring anything. So we're traveling. I remember, yeah, if you had to go to the bathroom, you went to the bathroom on the side of the road because it was like in the middle of the night. And we're traveling. And then on that Saturday, we finally make it to another place. And what I remember is that that was the night we actually got to sleep by a fire, which was nice. But I remember he was like, "It's time for dinner." And we're like, okay. Because at this point, I don't even remember if we ate anything Friday. Yeah. Anyway, what I remember most about Saturday night, though, is that there was another barn, and it was full of cages of live chickens. And He was like, pair up with someone and go make dinner. And so we had to kill a chicken and then do all the stuff to it. And then we cooked it over a fire that was in like some barrel or something. Maybe that's why I'm not a wilderness person. I look back to that and I was like, that chicken did not taste that good because it didn't have the Colonel Sanders, all the seasonings. But like, maybe when I say these stories out loud, I'm like, okay, that explains a lot in my life. Because so much of my quirks, so to speak, or anxieties or triggers, a lot of it does come up because of my faith, because of the toxic faith that I grew up in, because I no longer am. I have, I continue to get rid of those thoughts, but sometimes they sneak back in at times. But like, oh man. So and that is why I know that not everyone's been hurt by the church, and that's wonderful for you. But for those who have not been hurt by the church, use that privilege to help those who have been hurt, if that makes sense. Whenever we have a privilege of some sort, I think we're supposed to use that privilege to help others who don't have that privilege, if that makes sense. But I'm so very passionate about making sure to provide another type of Christianity, one that doesn't leave you with trauma, one that you can, to provide a church that you can go to for healing from any kind of hurt that you've experienced in life. Not just, I recognize not everyone's been hurt by the church, but church should be a place where you go for healing, not a place where you run away from, right? So anyway, I just had to share that. Because my goodness. And that's why I'm so excited about like some of the things I'm offering in this next month, like the deep dive into inclusive Christianity, because I think that's important. Because God, that narrative, the toxic narrative that is being spewed upon us by certain administration, and I'm speaking for myself, not for the church, for my church. I'm speaking for just me, Michelle Wilkie. I find this current administration to be absolutely, positively terrifying. And they're not, yeah. So the Christianity that we are seeing in main media and media right now is not, it's that exclusive form, right? And there needs to be a different narrative. And so I think that's why I want to do that class, to introduce people to, to some people, introduce inclusive Christianity, this version of Christianity that's about love and healing and not toxicity and exclusivity. It's about bringing people in, not kicking people out. It's about showing a God who is love, period. Not a God of judgment, not a God of terror, not a God who is up in the clouds with a magnifying glass ready to smite us like little ants that we are. That was from Bruce Almighty, one of my favorite movies. But anyway, I got off topic. I just wanted to share a little bit about some of the things that I experienced growing up in my faith. If you ever want to know more about me, feel free. I'm always willing to share any of my stories. And I always want to hear yours.